47th president of the United States.
I have been saying there is absolutely no way Donald Trump doesn't win this election. Every Democrat in a battleground state was pretending not to be a Democrat in order to win. And Kamala Harris just can't do that. She was hiding from the media. I mean, you remember this. Trump had a better message. Trump ran a more inspiring campaign. And you could find some cases of badass leaders, but I mean, what Trump did was pretty powerful in the moment.
Do you think that the Democrats thought that they could win a battle of ideas or that they could win via manipulation?
I think that
Thank you for taking the time to do this today, because obviously it is, well, not obviously to people listening or watching, but it's Thursday. So election was Tuesday evening into the night and into Wednesday morning. And you have been busy in the run up to election and through election. So I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Dude, I have to. My father-in-law is a huge fan of your books and the show. So if he found out that I didn't do the Jack Carr podcast, I don't know, man. I don't know. Christmas, I'd be sleeping in the yard or something. It wouldn't be good.
No, we don't want to have that. And I think I have his address too, because I sent a couple books his way.
Thank you for that.
So, yeah, of course. But man, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I was thinking like, man, post-election analysis, man, what a crazy few years, few months, weeks in the lead up, and now what we have in the aftermath of this election, essentially unprecedented, but fascinating on so many different levels. So I wanted to get your thoughts on everything that's been going on. And
can I give you my macro analysis key to the election? And it was really, I think, all you had to know. I'll tell you this. And because of my the radio show that I do, this is all public or people could check on it, right? I have been saying, without exception, every day since Kamala was the coronated nominee, or the coup nominee, whatever you want to say, I'm like, there is absolutely no way Donald Trump doesn't win this election. Like Donald Trump is absolutely going to win this election. There is no way, even when everyone's like, oh, look at the polls and it's all getting crazy. If you remember, there was this 2 or 3 week period in August and going into Labor Day, and everyone goes, oh my gosh, he's ahead. I was like, that's all crap. Donald Trump's going to win. And here's, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, but for me, the can't miss reason was, I get to talk to people running in battleground states like senators particularly, but some members of Congress too. And there was a theme, right? And the theme that I picked up from them in this election year was every Democrat in a battleground state was pretending not to be a Democrat in order to win, right? Mm-hmm. So Tammy Baldwin, who just eked it out in Wisconsin, does absolutely what Chuck Schumer wants, but she presents herself like, oh, I'm a maverick and I do my own thing. And, the whole Wisconsin nice and everything else. And no, she's actually a Chuck Schumer stooge. She'll do exactly what the left wants. And you just play that at Bob Casey, who's just lost to my friend Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. Bob Casey, same thing. My point is the way that Democrats, when it's tight, win is by having somebody who can be this chameleon and sort of play at both sides and everything else. And Kamala Harris just can't do that. Right? I was like, Kamala Harris is so left-wing. It is so well established. Her positions are so outside of the middle of America, meaning the moderate, not like swing state middle or flyover state middle. But I was like, there's just no way that they'll be able to sell this where it matters. And sure enough, Trump went 7 for 7 in the swing states. So I'm just saying, Mr. Jack, I'm just saying,
You did pretty good. And you have to do that every day, with seconds to make a decision or analysis on something. When you get asked a question or it comes up in a discussion or whatever it might be, you see something right before you walk on and start doing this radio show. I mean, that's hours a day that you have to be doing this. And that is how many hundreds and thousands of hours that people can go back and say, look, this one day he was wrong, and pull a pull quote from something from last February. I mean, that is wild. The new 1911X from 6 Hour. A balance of classic 1911 engineering and style with modern upgrades, including an ultra-low profile direct mount optic capability designed with the new Romeo X red dot optic. X-ray 3 day-night sights for extreme sight picture visibility. An adjustable flat blade trigger and custom G10 grip panels from LOK Grips. Designed with a full 1913 rail and stainless steel frame with undercut trigger guard. An extended ambidextrous manual safety and slide stop. Chambered in classic 45 ACP. Sig Sauer 1911X. Classic design meets modern innovation. Introducing the new Jack-Car BCM Mod 4 grip. Reduced angle for improved ergonomics and trigger control. New aggressive grip texture to maximize traction. Extended forward tang to close the gap between the trigger guard and pistol grip. High-rise beaver tail style backstrap. Open bottom to minimize weight. Includes mounting hardware for mil-spec lower receivers. Manufactured in the USA from high-quality impact-resistant polymers. Go to BravoCompanyUSA.com and get yours today.
You know, I'd say one of the things about doing radio, and yeah, it's 3 hours a day, and I'm with my co-host Clay, and we're on in that space that Rush built. So it's about 500 stations that we're on right now, from 12 Eastern to 3. And the thing about it is that you first of all, you kind of get into a rhythm. People are like, how do you talk for 3 hours a day? You get into a rhythm in how you store. I mean, it's instead of me writing it down, like you, I mean, I know you do podcasting too, but with your stories, right? You have to structure it, and you have a sense of not just the voice, but also where you're going, and maybe you break it down into acts, or I don't know how you do it. You're super good at it, but yeah, different parts. And for me, radio is just one big ongoing conversation, and so one of the biggest things that you can bring to it, and this does come from some degree of experience. I know people might think I look like I'm like 25, or maybe just got out of a frat party. The shirt color doesn't help. Sorry, but yeah. I'm in Miami, so this is like standard. But I've been doing this now for 14 years, and the institutional memory that you build up is just so, because you'll pull things faster and you'll remember things that some of these clowns, from years past said, or things that happened. And I think that's a really important part of the context, right? And that's one of the things about radio. Somebody will say something, they'll put out some statement, right? It'll be a member of Congress or a senator, and I'll be able to turn the audience and be like, I remember when this scumbag 6 years ago or 10 years ago was saying the exact opposite. And then, of course, we can have them pull, the actual clip, and I've got a team that can do that. But that's a very useful skill that you, again, just build up from reps, man. Just sitting in a chair, probably too much. I got to stretch my psoas muscles, or whatever they're called, the sartorial muscles. But yes, it's something that comes from a lot of doing a lot of radio.
Yeah, I could never do that. Like, if we needed to, if we said something that was like, I didn't really mean that, like, you could go back and edit this if you wanted to. When I'm writing the books, I can sleep on it. I can go back to that chapter, that paragraph, whatever it might be the next day, tighten it up, change it. But there's time. You don't have time when you're in a 3-hour conversation. I've always been impressed by people that could do that. And I was gonna ask you this later, but I'll do it right now since you brought it up. What was it like to find out that you guys were going to take over Rush's slot?
It's one of those things where you're walking in the footsteps of a legend, and I think that the decision, which was very sound and totally got it, was no one can take over for Rush. Like, let's not pretend, but Rush has an audience. He had a mission, and there are now 3 hours of radio that need to be filled. Let's take two different guys, put them together. And I mean, I used to joke around, but I think it's kind of stuck. I'm like, we couldn't fill Rush's shoes, so they put Clay in one shoe and me in the other, and we're walking as fast as we can, right? Or moving along as fast as we can. And the audience response has been really gratifying. Our station numbers are all very, very strong. I mean, the audience realizes that we're trying to continue the mission. We're always very respectful of Rush and his legacy. Rush's whole, I mean, this was really cool. Like, Rush's whole core team, some of whom have been with him for over 20 years. They kind of stayed on in a transition capacity initially. Like, they just didn't, they didn't want to leave us in the lurch. Then they all decided to stay because they enjoy the day-to-day with us, and the show has worked out really well. So, Rush's team is still, the engineer, executive producer. I mean, they've all stayed with us. So that's been really, really helpful too, because they bring a tremendous amount of institutional memory. Speaking of institutional memory, and with Rush, and, can even tell us like funny things from 20 years ago that Rush said that are similar to something we've said. Anyway, so we have a lot of fun with that. and now, yeah, we're going on. It'll be, I think, 4 years in June.
Wow.
And it's been a wild ride. I mean, I give a lot of credit to Clay, who's become a very good friend. He's a very inspiring guy professionally in a lot of ways. I mean, the guy sold his website to Fox News. It's public, but people can go look it up for a huge amount of money. And as a sports guy, but they were like, look, let's bring the sports guy who's kind of a converted Republican, used to be a Democrat. He's very open about this. And we'll put him with the, obsessed with William F. Buckley since high school nerd, who was in the CIA as an analyst for a while and likes national security and all that stuff. Well, let's put these two guys in a room, so to speak, and see how it goes. And it's worked. So, very happy about that.
Yeah, I know you guys work so well together, and congratulations on all of that, by the way. And appreciate you having me on when I come on. I always love talking to you guys.
We love having you on, man. It's great. It's so fun. And, you bring a little bit of Hollywood. We don't get a lot of Hollywood. You know what I mean? Like, we don't.
Yeah, shocker.
With the Amazon show, you know what I mean? Like, we're like, hey, we're with the cool kids now. So,
well, let's do it. And then, linking up in Park City. That was awesome. So if you guys come out here again, one of these skiing or whatever.
I love where you live without the skiing. Like, I just love the cool mountain air and the beautiful vistas and, hopping in the hot tub with the wife at night. Like, I don't know. I don't even ski and I love out that area. So maybe I should learn how to ski. I'll love it even more.
I don't know, something about hanging out at the lodge and getting a drink and hanging out in the hot tub. There's benefits there as well. So you had confidence that at half, let's say, of the American people, more than half of the American people, more than half the electorate would not allow themselves to be manipulated by a constant bombardment from legacy media, from celebrities, from former politicians, from whoever it was. Like, you had utmost confidence that more than half of the American people would see through that or be turned off by that, or just look at the issues and not the manipulation, which is harder to counter these days because you're carrying this device around with you 24/7 that is essentially a manipulation device, and manipulating thoughts and behaviors. And you were confident enough that the American people as a whole were smart enough to look at issues and see through any sort of veneer or manipulation from a certain party.
I mean, I can tell you, I have never been as confident about a presidential election and publicly and on the record, right? It's one thing to say,
right,
I knew it, right? Like, we all, like, when you watch football, you're like,
right,
I knew they were going to win. But I just said absolutely. And even when the numbers were looking kind of grim for Trump, as I said, there's just no way he's going to win. I was having to tell my audience, calm down. Not all of them, but some of them were really, upset at the prospect that, like, we're not going to get 4 more years of Trump. Kamala Harris is absolutely not up for this. And I was like, guys, just stay the course. It's going to be fine. I have total confidence. And in 2020, I was like, look, I think Trump's going to win, but, like, I don't, it's kind of a wild world right now with COVID and everything else. I was not. And 2016, I thought Hillary was going to win. I voted for Trump, but I thought Hillary was going to win. I was living in New York at the time. It's just so funny. Like, I have so many friends now in red states. They're just like, really, 2016? Like, I was like, guys, I lived in New York City. It went 80 something percent for Hillary. Like, it wasn't even close, right? Same thing with Biden, by the way, in 2020. And so I think maybe the more interesting or insightful part of this conversation from my end in terms of why would be, other than I just like talking about how I got this one right. Sorry, it's victory week.
Do it.
It's victory week.
Take the lap.
So take a little lap here. But yes, they have a tremendous machine at their disposal, but money doesn't buy elections. It's a tool for elections. So this is something that they always say. Kamala Harris spent $1 billion, and as you and I speak, she's actually $20 million in debt. The campaign is, which is amazing. She spent $1 billion in 4 months, give or take. It's an absolute deluge of media buys. Didn't do really much of anything for her. I don't think they could have. I think you would have gotten the same result that Kamala Harris got with effectively any Democrat in her place. I think you could have taken anyone who ran, I'm trying to think everyone who ran. There was like 20 of them. Everyone who ran in 2020 on the Democrat side in that primary and replace, I think Elizabeth Warren would have gotten probably more votes. I think Bernie Sanders probably would have gotten more votes, but certainly, like, very close. I mean, that's so, and the reasons, I think the reason that I knew Kamala would lose, other than that she couldn't play that. She can't play the, big tent moderate. I think that's just she also, there was such a phoniness to the whole thing. When you hide from the media, and she was hiding from the media. I mean, you remember this. You want to be president of the United States, but your plan is to just let other people talk for you and explain why you're up for this job. That wouldn't fly for any other job in existence, right? Like if someone hired, if someone hired you to do a podcast, you're like, I'm gonna let someone else do the podcast in my place. You're like, wait a second, like I don't think that's really gonna, you need to hear your voice. You need to hear you doing it. So yeah, I felt very strongly that she wasn't up for it, and the campaign showed that. And look, we're in a roughly 50-50 country, so you can get almost half of Americans to vote for any Democrat. It does not matter. But in that 1 or 2% margin of turnout or crossover, Trump had a better message. Trump ran a more inspiring campaign. I think it also stuck in people's memories that this guy got shot in the ear and said, fight, fight, fight. Truly the most badass thing I've ever seen in politics. I don't know what would really come close to that for a presidential candidate. Maybe you go back to like
Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, you're going to have to go way back in time,
yeah.
But nothing in recent memory. So, I was going to say, you go back to ancient Rome. I mean, I don't know. You could find some cases of badass leaders, but I mean, what Trump did was pretty powerful in the moment. So, yeah, I mean, I see no surprises with this at all. And I know it's kind of the heady moments of victory lap week still. And so I think everyone should really enjoy it. And the good news is, even for, I don't know how many like left-wing listeners, viewers you have, Jack. I'm guessing not a ton, but maybe. Again, Hollywood, right? He's cool. He's famous. So people like this stuff. He writes great books, no matter what your politics are. But I would just say the country is actually, and I truly mean this, the country is better off for this. It'll be better for everyone. That's the good news. I don't think it's about, the other side, the retribution. We'll get to that stuff later. But I think the country is better for everyone because of the result. And so that makes me very happy.
She was our first $1 billion candidate. Is that right?
I think $1 billion has been spent before on the Democrat side, but never in 4 months, right? I mean, this is like, when you think about the truncated schedule they had, I mean, no one spends $1 billion in 4 months. It was insane. I mean, no one's ever seen anything like it. I have friends who live in Pennsylvania and some of the other swing states, and they just said, I mean, everything was an ad, right? I mean, it was just, anyway, the consultants got very rich off of Kamala. They take some, I forget what it is. It's a really healthy
percentage,
healthy fee they take for ad buys, the political consultants. People talk about the consulting class. Some of these bandits are flying private, even if they lose, just because they're doing big ad buys. I'm like, hire me to do that. Wow. I'll shower a bunch of money on, TV stations in Peoria, give me a break.
Yeah, that stuff's amazing. Oh man. And we throw around terms like billion, trillion, because people see the deficit. It's like another trillion here, a trillion there, going about our day. $1 billion is a lot of money. It is almost difficult to spend that much money, and very difficult to go in the hole if you have unless you buy a few airlines, I guess. But it's very difficult to just spend that amount of money.
Yeah, you would actually have to try hard to find ways to do ad buys in that time period, to get that done. I think it's indicative of just the kind of the desperation of that campaign from the beginning. I also, there's a whole bunch of different ways it can come at this. I'm of the mind that Kamala allowing Biden to come to try to run again, given the obvious cognitive issues, and that's just a betrayal of faith in the American people. People who say, oh, Joe should have stepped aside. No, Kamala actually, I know they say, oh, it's about loyalty. It should be about the country. She was part of that lie. She propped him up, said he was sharp as a tack, great behind closed doors when you talk to him, all that stuff. And so I think that's disqualifying if you're looking at whether somebody has the best interests of the country at heart versus just their immediate political interests. And then the bigger thing for me, I would say, is you have the most wide open and disastrous U.S.-Mexico border. Our southern border was completely overrun. I mean, 10 million plus illegals in 4 years. We've never seen numbers like this. And people will point back to the 90s or even some of the early years of the Bush administration. those were Mexican single adult males primarily, who a lot of them were coming over for work, and a lot of them would go back after they would. So that gets counted in the crossing numbers. But what we're dealing with now under Biden Kamala, it's people coming from West Africa, from Southeast Asia, from all of Latin America, south of us, sometimes in family units, a lot of times single adult, military age males, to stay forever. Right. So this is it used to be, can you walk here from Mexico? And that was the illegal population. It was mostly young men looking for work, right? Agriculture work. Now it's, I'm going to, and I spent a lot of time, I'm sure you have too, with Border Patrol guys. I got friends in Border Patrol, particularly the Border Patrol union guys are really great. You talk to them, they'll tell you the truth, because they don't have to worry about getting fired for political reasons. But they'll have people that'll show up at the border who have paid the cartels. I've heard anywhere from $5,000 to like $10,000 or $15,000 a head. And they show up in some country that's easy to get to south of Mexico, and they transit through, and they just know they're going to stay. They wouldn't go through all this, right, if they didn't think and know that they were going to get to stay forever. And so that really tells you where the incentive structure is. And I just view that as, for Kamala and Biden, just an abject betrayal of the role of the executive branch, to encourage this, not just to allow it, to encourage this to happen, which I can go into why they did. I think that people recognize this, and I think that people recognize it in a way that it probably cost the Democrats power.
Yeah. Now, you talked about the Biden's acuity, and that one is so huge. Do you think that played into people's decision, or that was just kind of a thing hanging in the background, or something that's expected? I don't know, but to have someone lie to you for essentially 4 years and tell you, not just someone, the whole machine, everyone surrounding him, to include legacy media. I mean, all of those clips about the behind closed doors and how sharp he is. They're asking the American people not to believe what they see with their own eyes. And that can take us back to George Orwell's 1984. There's a line almost exactly like that about not believing what you see with your own eyes, or being asked not to believe something you see with your own eyes. And it was over and over and over again, yet you're seeing it. That part right there is so tough to think about. You have the vice president of the United States essentially lying to you for 3.5 years. And I've never talked about this before, but so this is, going back to CIA type terminology, it would be a single source intel, but from someone who has a solid history of reporting,
solid history of firsthand access, and a solid history of reporting. Yes,
yeah, there it is. So going back to that's what this is. So it is, not firsthand knowledge, but it was about 3.5 years ago, and it was coming from a senior military official, flag officer, but through someone else that I know, who is a Democrat at those levels. I know we're not shocked by that, leaving the White House and being so distraught that they call my friend and tell him that they don't know what to do with this person in the Oval Office, that he is not there in these meetings, and he is just completely out to lunch. And this is someone who shouldn't be making this call, but does. And then that person then tells me, and that was 3.5 years ago. And that's someone who's an ally, who's a Democrat, who's a supporter, probably a voter for Biden. And he is worried. And this is 3.5 years ago. Crazy. And then you have this whole establishment telling us that, oh, he's fine and he's sharp. That part is a betrayal of the American people, no doubt about it.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think when you look at the ethics of the people who are obsessed with Trump's ethics are somehow always so suspect, or just completely lacking. I mean, I used to say that the people who are constantly shouting about Trump's lies are some of the biggest liars I've ever seen in the media. They will lie, and people say, oh, what are you talking about? Okay. They will say that Trump lied about crowd size. And I'll sit here and say, okay, look, he says he's amazing, the biggest crowds in history, who cares? Like, that's not a lie that upsets or affects anybody in any meaningful way. They'll say that he said that Liz Cheney should be shot. That's just a lie. I mean, and that's a nasty, destructive lie meant to change your opinion about the character of another person in a way that is meant to help Democrats grab power. And I bring this up because the people that were telling us the whole time about, oh, Trump, and he's so bad and he's a liar, They all went along with the Biden thing, and Jack, they all knew. They all knew because you and I knew, because everyone knew at some level, right? I mean, you could see it. And they would just always remember that they even trotted out for a little bit. What was the I can't even remember now. Remember there was the phrase where they said, oh, cheap fakes. There's the deep fakes, and they had cheap fakes.
Mm-hmm.
And that lasted about a week from the White House, because that was earlier this year, because everyone's like, it's not a cheap fake, it's a video of the president. Like, if you're going to call it fake and it's real, we've got a problem. So they were all in on this, and Kamala was really the ringleader of the whole scam. And I think that people subconsciously, or I just think that they understood that there was something deeply dishonest about that. And with Joe Biden, I mean, I will say we did have a real-time test of, are you really voting with the Democrats? Are you voting for a candidate, or are you voting for a system? I like to call it the apparatus.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the Soviets, you know how they were.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and the answer is you're voting for an apparatus.
Yeah.
You're voting for this machine-like political system that creates certain outcomes with individuals who are all basically given orders by a hive mind that doesn't have any specific head, but has all these people that they're a collective, right? They're collectivists.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they'd say, oh, well, isn't that just like Republicans? No, I don't think anyone thinks that Donald Trump is some non-entity in part of a broader machine who makes no decisions. But the Democrat, Joe Biden, was, and I think Kamala would have been too, just a figurehead for other decision-making and other people to determine what policy should be and all the rest of it. So, and I'm glad that they didn't get away with that lie. I'm glad they didn't get away with the lawfare. I mean, there's so much justice that was done in the Democrats' loss, and that's one of the best things about it. And the greatest thing is what it means for the country going forward. But the second best thing is it was a slap down of so much bull crap. I don't know if I can curse on your podcast,
Sure.
but bull crap.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all fascinating to me as I look at it and I study it. Did you see what Adam Carolla, he had that thing about politicians being on that racetrack at Disneyland where you can spin the wheel as the driver, but you're on the track. And there's no getting off that track. And that's what they're looking for, is just this apparatus, this machine, to have someone there that just spins the wheel, but it doesn't do anything. A 5-year-old can get on that. A 2-year-old can get on that at Disneyland and just go along on this track that is a car, but there's a track down the middle of it, and nothing lets you actually steer it and get off that track. And when you get someone who comes into that system that tries to drive off the track, then that entire bureaucracy, that entire apparatus that only continues to grow in power, that is when they come for you.
Well, that reminds me of the CIA, right? That place, it seems bureaucratic and lethargic and often inept until somebody pisses off the 7th floor. Then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose and you're toast. So yeah, any machine-like entities or bureaucracies are the single thing they are best at. You know, it's like secret police in third world countries or in authoritarian and dictatorships. What is their primary job? It's not security. It's keeping the regime in place, right? I mean, that's the one thing they're really focused in on, keyed in on, and really good at, like keeping like the people safe or counterterrorism mission or something. No, that's all. If they have time, they'll get to that. It's making sure the big guy who's funneling money to them, legally and illegally, stays in power. And I think that unfortunately you see that same mentality in a lot of American institutions now, where it's just protect the institution at all costs.
Yeah.
And whatever that means. And anyone who's a threat, even of meaningful reform, becomes the target, becomes the problem within.
Yeah. Do you think that the Democrats thought that they could win a battle of ideas, or that they could win via manipulation? Because they're in this elite class, they know better than anyone else. They're going to maintain control, grow in control, power. Do you think that or do you think it's a mix? Do you think some of them actually believe in these ideas, or do they believe in just manipulating the American people to increase their control and power?
I don't want to get too deep into it, Jack, because I'm going to have to come back on your podcast to talk about it. But this is actually the thesis of a book that I have written. It currently is currently with this being sent to the CIA like this week, actually.
Wow.
At least that's my plan. to get it reviewed, and then I have a publisher lined up, but I have to send it to the CIA, and then I have to send it to the, I got to send it to the publisher. I go through all this thing, but it's on this question, because I think this is the single most, especially in the world of interconnectedness and machine learning and AI and everything that we have. These understanding human brains and the manipulation thereof is essential to human freedom and the future of our species, quite honestly, certainly a future of America. I think that to bring it into sort of more current terms or current political realities, the big thing in the 2020 election that I don't believe people who operate outside the media have as much of an appreciation for was the scale and scope of the censorship and propaganda mechanisms that were for the Democrat Party as part of really an extension of the DNC and the Biden campaign, and then eventually of the Biden White House. When COVID became this excuse to go all out, people talk about the shutdown of election denialism. Although, Jack, what happened to those 14 million votes, man? As I sit here talking to you,
I saw that. I saw a chart that showed that
14. That's real. By the way, no one. This is not in dispute.
Numbers,
this is
right.
Somehow, yeah. I mean, there might count off a couple million more in California, but you're looking at 10, 11, 12 at a minimum, it seems, million votes that just didn't happen this time. I do think that's very weird. I'll put it that way.
I will give you that it is odd.
Yeah, right. Like, I don't want you getting kicked off of YouTube, but I do think it's weird. But the election, but isn't that the point? Or the election denialism stuff actually came after the COVID denialism issue, where social, and I dealt with this personally. I mean, I was getting strikes and Twitter and shutdown, and I've been YouTube has destroyed like 4 of my accounts in the past. It was like, you're saying things that aren't true. By the way, I'm not kidding. Everything that I ever said about COVID that I got in trouble for ended up being correct. Of course, right? I'm not the only one, but it's not just censorship. They say it's censorship of disinformation. They actually censored things under the guise of disinformation that were true.
Yeah.
And that's when you really start to feel like you're in, the opening pages of the Gulag Archipelago or something, right? Like, that's really bad. And I think that to the point you're making, or the question you're asking about the manipulation piece of all of this, Elon buying X, I know a lot of people aren't on X. It doesn't matter, though. The fact that there is a place now where free speech is the baseline, and you can't break the law. I mean, there's some limits, right? But free speech is the baseline. That affects the rest of the information ecosystem. It makes it harder for Facebook, YouTube, and these others to be as totally just hammered down in a partisan way. And it means that people can get ideas, hear things, share clips, see video. Now if you're a blogger, you're a podcaster, no one uses the term blogger anymore, but you know what I mean? If you're somebody that's creating your own content, you can go right on X and you'll find that original video of what Kamala said easily. This wasn't the 51 intelligence officers with the Hunter Biden laptop, like, they were rigging the system, and Elon broke, and we were very close to like a turnkey totalitarian information system here with the whole COVID thing. Like, it was, they were getting so much information dominance. And I think that Elon's breaking that hasn't made it go away, hasn't even equaled it out, but just breaking the stranglehold they had was a big part of this win, Jack. Honestly, I think it was a big part of what happened in 2024.
Yeah, let's take me to these 51. I have that down here. Is something I wanted to ask you about. These 51 intelligence officials who signed that letter about Hunter Biden's laptop, knowingly or unknowingly themselves being manipulated. I know, discrediting themselves, of course, in the process. How many of those? Well, we shouldn't ask that because we don't know. I know at least one person who signed that from another mutual friend who now regrets it. Because a friend, another intelligence official who their buddies says, hey, I need you to sign this. I guarantee this is true type thing. And they do.
Right, sure.
So there's probably more than one out of the 51. But regardless, that's a big number of people from the intelligence apparatus who put their names on the line to influence an election. And many of them had to do it knowing they're bright. A lot of them are bright guys. Maybe some of them aren't, but they had to know exactly. Most of them know what they were doing.
Oh, I think it was a disinformation op, meaning I don't think that they got it wrong. I think that they were all hands on deck to stop Donald Trump from getting 4 more years. And if that meant putting forward their credentials, because it was really a credentialism thing, right? More than anything else. It's like, oh, I was the former, I was a deputy assistant secretary of who gives a crap from the State Department. Right. But they put, these names and these credentials, these titles, and lit them on fire because that was what it required in the moment. And people can say, oh, it didn't matter. No, actually, one of the big things that Biden was promising was that it was going to be, I know this is like laughable to people now, and we're just focused on the dementia and everything else. Although if you follow Biden's political career, and I have for a long time, but I've also looked into his background. I mean, the guy's been an a-hole for 50 years. Like, he's not a nice person. He's not a good guy. He'll do absolutely anything. He'll grandstand on say absolutely anything, grandstand on anything. Was part of the trying to destroy Justice Thomas back in the day. I mean, really led that charge, Senate Judiciary. He's a scumbag. So, but he ran as a uniting grandfather who was just going to make everything normal and cool again. And when everyone has COVID and is getting all freaked out, that was an appealing message. And I actually have scumbag relatives who are selling out access to the highest echelons of the United States government to China and Ukrainian oligarchs. Like, I don't think that would have played well. And clearly, for these 51 people to sign their names to this, it's because they knew it wasn't going to play well, as in it mattered. And so they tried to just kill the story, and they, to some degree, were able to do so. And I think that whatever, ignominious connotation their names and titles now have is well deserved. And I think it's funny. There was somebody I knew, I won't name him, but came out of the intel community, a guy I had worked with. And look, I was a CIA analyst, right? Like, there are a lot of schmucks in the intelligence community. I just tell everybody, it's just not, there's some awesome people. There are some, it's funny.
It's like anywhere else.
It's funny. You were a SEAL. So like, people think, and they're like, oh, like, I'm like, you understand the CIA, there's like this tiny little part of the CIA that has the like paramilitary, like badass, whatever. Everybody else is basically just reading stuff, going to meetings, and having coffee. Like, maybe they do it in some foreign country, but there's, there'll be people also say to me, they'll go like, oh, like, you weren't a case officer. I'm like, most of the case officers I met, I'm not like a tough guy. I could have whooped their ass. Like, there weren't, it's not like some brotherhood of badasses. You get into some of the, special activities, you get into the paramilitary, but you know what I mean? Like, the public's mind about the CIA is so funny to me. Because even they'll be like, oh, a case officer. I'm like, you know what a case officer should look like? Totally schlubby, melts into a crowd, have no idea he's there. You actually don't want a case officer who looks like James Bond in, any of the iterations that he has, with like a square jaw and who's jacked and everything else, because like, it's going to attract attention. And it's going to, anyway, put that aside. I just think it's really funny the perceptions people have of all this stuff. But yeah, and where were we on the intel world? Sorry, I went on my rant about.
Yeah, no, I love it. No, just
the latte drinkers of Langley, which
someone you weren't gonna name.
Yeah, no, that was great. Sorry, see, someone wasn't gonna name, and I won't. But I mean, he was a senior level guy on the outside, and it's known that he took some public facing roles later on. But he wrote some op-ed, I forget even where it was, and it was just like, as an intelligence officer who is nonpartisan in his assessments, like, Trump is going to do terrible, like a very huffy, but I'm a nonpartisan. And then it came out, he's donated like $5,000 or whatever the maximum is every year for the last 2 decades to Democrats. Like, but that's the mentality. That's the Beltway mentality. I have a credential, so my thing is more important than yours. Like, actually, you're just kind of like a low T Hillary / Obama / Biden / Kamala supporter.
Oh, man. Yeah, I was actually at CIA a couple weeks ago, doing a little filming there in the lobby. They were kind enough to let us come and film there in the lobby, which they've done for a couple different shows. I think the first one might have been Patriot Games back in the day with Harrison Ford, based on the Tom Clancy novel. But we got to do that as well, which was really special to be back there and look at that wall, the memorial wall, and look at the book, knowing some names that are written down in the book, and then other ones that are just stars that don't have a name attached to them because of what they were doing. So that was pretty special and powerful to be there.
Yeah, look, the CIA right now, it's very fashionable on the right. I mean, I just make jokes really mostly about the analysts, but also some of the case officers, because they think they're so tough. But because the analysts it is a society of nerds. Like, that is true. That public perception is pretty accurate. And I speak from what I know as one who was there for 4 or 5 years, whatever it ended up being. But we're going to first of all, we need the CIA. So it's a little bit like when people talk about getting rid of other agencies, you're like, we're going to get rid of the FBI. I'm like, and replace it with the Bureau of Federal Investigation. Like, you need a foreign intelligence service, and you need one that is, you want one, hopefully, that is very confident and very clear on mission and non-politicized and gets it. I can tell you from friends of mine who are still on the inside that the morale at the agency is very low right now. And morale, I think, at other intelligence agencies would probably be very similar because of all the stuff that well, first of all, there's like the weird politicization piece and like Transgender Appreciation Day and all these things that people have to do now as part of the kind of the DEI industrial complex. Some people love that, but some people don't. And then there's also being a political football, like having people argue about, really former CIA director coming out to speak about this and all the anti-Trump stuff and the role in the dossier. But we go to war with China in 10 years, you're going to want a really robust intelligence collection capability. And maybe it's not even a direct confrontation, but, who knows? Could be some proxy stuff on the other side of the globe. And I don't know who it will be or what it will be, but you need a foreign intelligence arm. There are great people at the CIA. I like to joke around about it. I have some very dear friends who are still in the CIA. But right now, morale is in the toilet. And I think the sense of mission is very strained based on everything that I'm being told. And I think you can just kind of see from the outside, like what the intel community got so huge post 9/11. What's everybody doing there now? Do you know what I'm saying? And
Wow.
Unfortunately, part of it, I think, got turned a little bit inward against the American people. And I know about this too on the domestic side. This is more FBI, federal law enforcement, but like the threat of right-wing extremism and January 6th and all this stuff. Once you start getting intelligence agencies that are looking at that, things get really uncomfortable really fast. And I think that the Trump administration, I'm hoping, is going to clean a lot of that stuff up. I mean, we want patriots and high performers with a clear mission and the clear ability to do that mission, the political backing they need, whether it's Langley or anywhere else. I don't think they have that right now.
Yeah, similar to the military. You want a military that is prepared to go to war, and that is their focus, and that's what they're doing every day. More of that, less of these other things that you mentioned. Or what you get are senior level leaders their best efforts after all these years in service and having, let's say, at the very least 20 years to prepare for an eventuality is what we see in August of 2021. That is the best that they could do. And it wasn't like we went in a week before, a month before, the year before. No, we went in almost 20 years before. And we had all sorts of different incursions from the British to the Soviets, 79 to 89. You can go back in history further, but we had our own lessons over 20 years to look at. And yet August of 2021 was the best that they could do. How about a little cleaning of house? How about a little accountability? How about a little more focus on the war part and a little less on some of these other things that don't factor in when it comes to winning a war and crushing an enemy?
I remember a guy wrote Imperial Hubris. You remember that one?
Yeah.
Came out.
Oh yeah, have it.
Right? Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've got that one too. I actually read that before I went into Langley, and he was making that case. I believe it was. Do you remember the guy? I remember the author's name.
It's on my shelf in the other.
Yeah, I have it. I think it's Mike. It'll come to me in a second, or someone in your audience will Google it, and we'll get it by telekinesis or something. But I'd say this. First of all, when it comes to lessons learned in Afghanistan, you look at like the British, for example, and it's not even just the lessons the British learned. It's which Afghan war, right?
Yeah.
They went
to choose from right there.
Yeah, you got a handful, and they didn't get much. The situation didn't get much better. So they had, as a different approach too of this. I mean, I forget. You might recall, but essentially, there was like this ongoing imperial service that you were supposed to, really be long-term in that place, in the region, have real area expertise. Like you weren't cycling out every 3 months or 6 months, different units. And they couldn't figure it out. And I think that we went in with our technology and a sense of initially truly righteous indignation after 9/11, which is correct and true. But the long game, I mean, dude, I was there in 2010, and again, just doing my little analyst things, but I had tremendous access and visibility because of my role at the agency as a let's just say a liaison between high level people. So I would see the stuff that was going back and forth between the deciders. And I just remember reading this, and I was a pretty young guy at the time, being like, this just isn't going to work. Like this whole plan is just, and the old the problem is the old State Department folks who've been doing like South Asia for a long time, they're kind of surly about everything. It's like, they've been through a lot, they've seen a lot, but most of them are like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. There's no way. And I remember being there like, so this isn't going to work. Everyone kind of says it, but I get it. Like if you're somebody who, whether you're in a, what do they call them? Original reconstruction team. That's what they call them in Iraq. I guess they had those in Afghanistan too. The State Department teams that were supposed to be helping with reconstruction efforts, or you're at a combat outpost, or you're a forward deployed SF team. I mean, I visited with some of those guys in Iraq and Afghanistan to talk to them. What are you guys seeing? What's going on here? Spend some time in their neck of the woods. And I get that that nobody wants to be doing what they're doing and putting the risk or taking the risk that they're taking and feel like it isn't worth something. But one thing that's heartbreaking is most of the combat veterans that I talk to now, I have a lot of friends who served in either Iraq or Afghanistan, a lot of them through media, some of them I know from back in the day, and they do all ask this question, like, what was Afghanistan for? And I don't have great answers.
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially when it comes from the mother or father of someone who lost a child.
Yeah,
it's so tough.
I think that's one of the things also that Trump has really, people can say whatever they want about him, but 4 years, no new wars. I think that's, and no wars breaking out that it's likely that we're about to get really pulled into or something either. You know what I mean? I think that for the GWAT generation with, I don't even, I think it's 2 or 3 million now total who served over there, and the thousands of KIA, and then tens of thousands of seriously or severely injured. The government, and the United States should be able to look at those who served and say, this is what we accomplished. And I don't know. I mean, you were GWAT, you were a SEAL. What do you think?
Yeah. So for me, I look at it and I think, what are the lessons that what we owe those people who didn't come home, and what we owe those who came home dealing with the physical and emotional trauma of the battlefield, is to learn those lessons, but then not just learn them, apply those lessons going forward as wisdom. That is the least that we can do. And it might be the only thing that we can really do long term.
I'll tell you this, and this isn't, there's what they'll say politically, and then there's what you'll know from talking to people. I think it's maybe calmed down a little bit, but there was a period of time where I would come across people who, it was clear to me, if they could give the order for a Marine Expeditionary Force, or 101st or 82nd, or to go into Ukraine and start piling up Russian bodies, they would do it. Now, that doesn't mean it will happen, right? Because I'm not saying they're necessarily but there was that sentiment on the left for a while, or among people who were, putting the Ukraine flags and stuff everywhere. And now, while I'm very sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause of independence and not wanting to be invaded and everything else, I also don't think that American troops should be deployed there. I also don't think this is our fight, because if it is our fight, then I think everything is our fight, right? And I don't want to take that position either, because I think that what Trump got to with Liz Cheney recently in that exchange, where they lied and said that she was, if it's not you that's going to do the fighting and it's not your kids that are going to do the fighting, you better be goddamn sure that you're giving an order, commander in chief, anybody in the military chain of command, that is something you could stand behind no matter what happens. And the veterans that I talk to are, it's tough conversations on this issue. That's the best way I can say it.
Yeah, it's hard to find a war that we don't like these days with the establishment. It's for whatever reason. So your book, and I'm looking forward to reading it when it comes out. I didn't know you had one in the works, but are you also going into, because this kind of dovetails on the last thing that I asked about, where did this hatred come from for the foundational principles that allowed us to become the greatest country in the world. And that main one being equality of opportunity. When did that start to get morphed with this equity idea, where you have people saying the quiet part out loud, to include the vice president, saying that we want to get everybody to the same place? Where did that come from? Was that a conscious thing, you think, to having words twisted and morphed, and now all of a sudden we have this equity equality thing?
Yeah.
And one obviously on the side of let's say a socialist type of mentality, paradigm, model, where everyone gets to the same place. Wonderful. Except that place is here, where you have the best ideas rising to the top. You have drive and innovation and everything that made this country wonderful, that getting sidelined and replaced with this equity. Where did this come from? And was it intentional, you think?
Oh, it's absolutely intentional, and it is fundamental to what is a collectivist, statist, communist ideology. I always think it's so funny, these people who they play like language police about all these things, and they'll be like, "Oh, communism, you mean the thing where everyone's, the thing where everyone's supposed to be the same?" Like, no, actually, that's not what communism is. You always have very powerful, very rich elites in a communist system who just feed the masses crap about how we're all the same, so that they can control them, they can exploit whatever the resources are of that nation. I mean, this is the truth about these things. But I would say sameness is actually a precursor for control. And so one of the things that you see is and that's, you can apply that principle to so many things. Why do you think they're so obsessed with there's really no such thing as gender? I mean, of course there has to be, because they'll pick and choose and go back and forth, but it's so fluid as to be essentially non-existent. It's because the ideal here is to create a uniformity among the population that is so extreme that it makes it easier for everyone to be controlled. You don't have independent thought, you don't have independent needs, you don't have independent rights. And I know that that can sound very extreme, but I think it's worth noting for everybody. I mean, the second largest economy for a single nation state in the world is China. Who runs China? This isn't like we're talking about some theory of authoritarianism that is in the distant past and we don't have to worry about anymore. And I think at some level in COVID, you saw that the impulse for that level of control is very much alive here in this country. And the equity push is really just a form of racial Marxism. So what you do is you have the constant antagonism of different, you say, oh, you were historically oppressed and you were oppressed, and you go here on the hierarchy and you go there, and you keep people agitated about things that no one can actually control. And you keep people agitated about things that those alive today in many cases, had nothing to do with, right? If you're talking about historical wrongs, but you're able to spin narratives that keep the people focused on the make-believe barriers between, that keep them separate from their fellow Americans, let's say, while the elites get to run their game and do whatever they want. It's effectively like a divide and conquer strategy. And I mean, I wish more people don't learn anything about communism in schools. I gotta, I went to like some pretty reasonably fancy institutions. My high school was like I don't know, it was a school for the gifted, although, I'm not saying I'm gifted, but, it was like, wow. And I went to a pretty decent college, not one of the fanciest, but decent. You don't learn anything about these things. You don't learn about Mao's rise to power, Stalin's rise to power. You don't learn that these guys were journalists. Like, they don't really teach you about, the way that the Bolsheviks seized power. They were never popular. In fact, they chose their name to make it seem like they were They were a majority when they're always in a minority, even among the left in the early days of the Soviet Revolution, right? The Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks, like, these are not things that people know and think about, but there is a playbook. And this is, it's not about esoteric history. It's not about, oh, well, I've got a bunch of dusty old books, although, Jack, you and I do. We like our dusty old book.
This is true.
But it's about what is the playbook that people who want to control you use, and equity is just a new, equity in the context of how we're discussing it here in America is just another version of social justice, which is just another version of, or an adjunct to, political correctness, which you take these things back, and there are always Marxist roots. There are always elements of, whether it's the American Communist Party or the radical left in this country, that are attached to these concepts and these things. Comes out of the university system as well. So yeah, I mean, equity is about, it is simultaneously about division and control, and the war on merit too, which is a very real thing, because a society where merit is rewarded, again, irrespective of gender, skin color, anything else, is going to be both highly productive and generally happy, because people need something. They need aspiration, and they need purpose and achievement. And when you deny that to people, you replace it with whatever the state offers, right? Whatever the system, whatever special awards are given that are meaningless, whatever order of Lenin, so to speak, they can pin on your chest. It all means nothing. And this is why it's fascinating to see somebody like Elon Musk, who, I mean, I just love the guy's work. Like, I just celebrate his whole catalog. I don't know what to say. I mean, what he's done is incredible on a whole range of things. I don't think it's possible these days to be somebody who has achieved a tremendous amount, truly on your own, through your own hard work and determination, that is changing the world, and not see that there is a political ideology in this country that is obsessed with tearing down. You didn't build that. It's not you. There's a system that's holding some people down, elevating other people, and it reads and sounds a lot like the Marxism of old, because it really just is. It's just a new version of it.
Yeah. Oh man, I want to. So do you think, so we have this battle of ideas that used to be the whole, like, we're going to have this battle of ideas, best idea is going to rise to the top. Now we have these devices that can manipulate us, and you have this whole structure in place, from legacy media to big tech to half of the electorate to politicians to with lobbyists with connections to foreign entities. You have all of these things in play. So do the Democrats think they had the power to convince enough of the electorate that these things were good for the country and for them personally? Open borders are in our best interests as a country. We should not be energy independent. We should rely on other countries for that. Some hostile to the U.S. For something that essentially runs our economy, runs our national security apparatus. That's in our best interest and in yours. Okay. Forcing girls to share the bathrooms and locker rooms with mentally deranged older men. They thought that was a winning issue when it comes to parents on both sides of the aisle. Allowing males to play sports against females, win female trophies, break female records, take female scholarships, potentially hurt female athletes in contact sports or even non-contact sports. I don't know what you call volleyball. It's about, I don't know if that's contact or not, but the ball certainly is. You've seen that video of
contact of a 200-pound guy spikes it in your face and you're a chick. Yeah.
Sure. Mandatory buyback programs. That's buyback. We didn't buy this pistol, rifle, or shotgun from the government, yet you're calling it a buyback program. That to me just tells me you're lying to me right away. They thought that was a winning issue, or have for a long time, while they're spouting that, while they're surrounded by people protecting them 24/7, carrying these same pistols and rifles that they want to take from you, essentially saying that my life is more important than yours, peasant. And from the same, I mean, you can go on and on and on about these issues. How do you look at those and think that these are winning issues unless you completely manipulate the populace?
Well, no, I think that the manipulation of the populace is the whole that's the whole game for them in a lot of respects. I would say the way, though, that they do, part of how they do that is what you're talking about, is what they believe and do. But we have elections and we have election cycles in this country, and so you can follow pretty closely that they come into power. Biden comes into power, and you get all of a sudden, this is just go back to 2021. He wants to freeze all deportations for, I think it was 100 days, and he's undoing all these Trump executive orders at the border, and there's all this stuff that's happening. You say, hold on a second, that's not what Biden was. This isn't what we were promised. This isn't right. Exactly. There's what the left, the Democrats do. There's what they say when they're not worried about people, holding them accountable for it. And then there's the cycle. And this is kind of what I mentioned, by the way, about in all the battleground states, check this out. There were Democrat senators like Bob Casey, who just lost to Dave McCormick, a veteran, a great dude. He was running ads. Casey was running ads where he's like, I kind of like this Trump guy, or work with Trump. Total garbage. Like, no way he was ever going to do anything with Donald Trump. But you see that this is how Democrats maintain power. They have people in these, purple or battleground states, whatever. And when it comes time to the election, they don't say all those things you're saying. That's Democrat orthodoxy. That's Democrat party dogma. But the whole game, the manipulation, is to convince people right around when they're voting that that's not the dogma. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that they think that some dude smacking volleyballs into some girl's face is a winning issue for them. That's what they believe should happen. That's what they push for when they're in power. But then when they need to stay in power, or they need to, they lie effectively about what they want. I mean, another example of this is, I'm sure you've seen this, like, it's not happening. It's not happening. And then it's, why are you talking about this so much? And then it's not happening that much. And then it's happening, but it's a good thing. Like, this is the way they always, right? And it's all just meant the manipulation is the manipulation of time, right? Of people forgetting about this issue, of dragging it out, of confusing people on it. But they go through this with so many things, like whether it's child gender transitions, oh no, that's not happening. It absolutely is happening, but they go through all those stages, and then eventually they go, yeah, what are you going to do about it? Did we just fool you in the last election? That's the truth.
And how do they keep getting away with this no voter ID? It seems so obvious that, I mean, it's so disrespectful to the people you're saying don't have the ability to go get an ID. I mean, you don't have to have a driver's license. And
of course,
I mean, it's so interesting that they believe that you can talk down to a certain segment of society and continue to do so, and eventually they're not going to figure this out.
Well, I think a big part of it is that they've spent so much time. The Democrats have spent so much time and effort saying that voter ID is racist, that for a lot of people, there's just this assumption then, like, well, I don't know, like, I guess voter ID is racist. You know what I mean? Like, it's just because when you think it through, I don't think it's possible to think that voter ID is racist. In fact, courts, it gets complicated because there's Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and part of that I think has now been struck down by the Supreme Court a few years ago. But on its face, I think there was a case, in Indiana went to the Supreme Court. Voter ID is constitutional and fine, right? There's nothing discriminatory about voter ID. But then what happens is Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act comes into play, and they say, well, under this context, in this place, we're going to say it's discriminatory. And you're like, but it's not. But they just want to play these games. Look, I think that I hate saying things that end up being not true. Like, it legitimately bothers me, right? So if I say, we're going to find out that a lot of illegals voted in the last election, which, by the way, I actually don't believe, right? But if I said that and it turns out it's not true, I'd be very embarrassed about this. I think on the election issue, we need to have, and now we can do it, I think Donald Trump needs to appoint a commission to look into this. I think whether it's the Senate or the House needs to have a committee to look into it as well, for election integrity. We'll call it like a Trump executive branch election integrity strike force to come together and just give people the real hard facts on where is fraud occurring, where are the risks of fraud, what's really going on, so that people of goodwill can be on the same sheet of music. One of the problems we have right now, and this is a huge part of the illegal immigration debate too, by the way, separately, they don't even collect or have the data, right? In the way that you need to be able to make the case and make the argument. So that, I think, on the voter integrity thing is very important, because look, we really couldn't have another election where there's just a tremendous amount of back and forth over whether this thing was legit. In 2016, they lied and said it was Russia collusion. In 2020, Joe Biden got 81 million votes. And I'm somebody, I don't like to do the conspiracy thing. Joe Biden got 81 million votes. You know what I mean? Like, I sit there, you say it out loud. It's not the first time, but now the data piece that we can add to it is, and there's 14 million. Like, if he got 81 million then and Kamala got 78 million or 79 million, whatever. Now you're like, all right, look, I guess there's a lot of Democrats out there. 14 million just went poof, gone. I don't know, man. I don't know, Jack.
It's interesting.
Smell something.
Yeah, I saw some numbers, mathematician guy run through all the numbers on it once, and it was pretty interesting to see. And
did he have an explanation for you that you were like, that totally like, I'm open to it? Did he have something for you that totally makes sense?
I am not a math guy, but my takeaway was that yeah, this doesn't add up.
Oh, it doesn't add up. Okay. I was like, please explain. I would love to know.
No, he was showing how mathematically that this couldn't work. It was very high level. Like I could barely follow, probably didn't follow most of it, but that takeaway was that this is statistically an impossibility. Maybe he's confusing me with numbers. Maybe it's not, maybe it's not accurate. I don't know, but it's certainly, that's the takeaway. Like, that's interesting.
It strikes me as a little weird. I'm just saying. So
something strikes you as weird usually or off. There's probably weird or off. Like you probably listen to that. It's kept us alive for a long time as a species, listening to that Sixth Sense or those things that quite add up.
I mean, I promise I will read if anyone comes out with a serious analysis of the numbers that shows that, it really just was because of COVID or whatever, I will read it and I will take that argument, on its face. But all I know right now is everyone's like, yeah, I don't know, 14 million just kind of disappeared. We're supposed to sit here and be like, oh, okay. It's one thing to believe that there was a boom and just have that, right? Like we have the other side of the mountain. Like we have the other piece of the data now where you go, really?
Yeah, hey, maybe worth looking into rather than,
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? So. Who knows? Garbage also. Last days, oh my Lord, of the campaign here. You get once again people saying the quiet part out loud. You get deplorables before, you get clinging to Bibles and guns, and now garbage. And then you get the walk back on oh no, there's supposed to be some sort of a comma, or don't believe what you're seeing and hearing. Again, continue to go along with this. Don't believe what you're seeing with your own eyes. Again and again and again, and to include, hey, half of the electorate's garbage.
Yeah, I think it was hilarious to any of us who were paying attention to the polls, the numbers, and of course the polls ended up being wrong, but I was expecting that. But trying to look at what was really happening in these different states, to be told incessantly by the media that a comedian's joke at the Madison Square Garden rally about Puerto Rico, a roast comedian, that was going to turn the Latino community against Trump forever. Like, not only is it not true, it's just kind of condescending toward like Latinos, like, oh, I could vote based on my sense of economic interest and, national security and a whole bunch of other things like all other Americans, or I could just be upset that some guy made a joke at a rally that no one at the rally even knew about beforehand. Like, you know what I mean? It never made any sense. And of course, we ended up seeing that Trump did phenomenally well for a Republican with the Latino vote this time around. And actually Latinos were part of delivering Trump the presidency. So, and then with the Biden comment, it's funny. I think that Joe has actually gotten away with a lot for a long time because we've gotten used to, oh, he's just kind of this like kooky old man, and he just sort of says things sometimes. And maybe, there's some cobwebs up top. I mean, there are. I don't know if that means that he should always get bailed out for whatever it is that he says that is a blunder. But the media, I mean, you mentioned the Orwell command, or the Orwell quote about the, Big Brother and the party's final command was not to believe the evidence of your eyes and ears. Like that is absolute power, really. If you can convince people that what they see and hear and what their observed reality is not in fact true, you can convince them absolutely anything. You can convince them that men can get pregnant.
Yep. And I want to make sure it's got a few more minutes with you. I know you've been talking all day and I appreciate you coming on and talking with me.
I want a tomahawk, by the way. We're on video, right? I want one of these badass tomahawks that I see here. You got to tell me how I get the hookup with the tomahawk. Anyway,
see what I can do. I might know a guy. So repercussions of this just quickly here before we go, repercussions of this election. Do you think one party is looking at itself and is going to, do some introspection, or continue think we need just to manipulate harder next time? Meaning, is identity politics on the ropes? Is there hope that both parties can get back to a place where competence and content of character replace identity and color as job qualifiers? are we on that path, or is this just the lessons learned from one side going to be like, just we need to double down on our manipulations?
I think that we're in the realm of with that question, even for the Democrats, we're in the realm of the Rumsfeldian unknown unknowns, as in there will be things that occur in the first, call it, 12 to 18 months of the Trump presidency that will largely determine. Look, they have a coalition. They're not going to abandon it, a coalition that is rooted at some level on identity politics and on gender and gender identity issues. And the Democrats are the party of, I forget, I can't remember what Tucker said. It was something like the Democrats are the party of like weak men and unhappy women or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Sorry for the Democrats in your audience. You're getting a rough one here.
Yeah.
But I think that they're going to have to keep that coalition going. But in terms of right now, here's why I'm dancing around this a little bit. There is no leader of the Democrat Party right now, which is bizarre. You have a Democrat president, but I mean, they shoved that guy out of the way. So no one thinks that I think Joe Biden's actually quite happy for his own legacy reasons that Kamala Harris didn't win, because he always gets to say, you guys should have gone with the winner. I truly believe that that's his view on it. And I'm sure, I'm quite confident that's correct. I would say there is no clear leader of the Democrat Party right now. And I think one will emerge, and it will be based on what are the primary challenges that the Trump administration faces. They've already tried the lawfare stuff. I think that for me, a defining moment is going to be, does Trump try to go for real border security, which includes a considerable increase in deportations for foreign nationals who are here without legal right to be here? To do that at the scale that even say like Eisenhower did way back in the day, people can look that up. I think they ended up deporting, I think it was about over 1 million people in a year, which for the time, you remember that far fewer people, far fewer illegals. If he's going to do a real roundup and deportation operation, he's not going to get, there's like 30 or 40 million probably in the country now. No one really knows. Maybe they'll say 20 million. Who knows? If he does that, the Democrats are going to lose their minds. Because I do believe that their long-term plan has been to convert people to citizenship and then voters. And this is not a knock on people. Like I get like the basic human reason people want to be here. It's a great country, and most of the people who are coming here are good people who want to work hard. But if you don't control your borders, you don't have a country. So life is not fair. The world is not fair. Some people are born here. Some people are born in North Korea. We can't change that. And I think that's where you may see the biggest challenge to Trump emerge early on. And so then it will be, how does, identity politics, the coalition, how does that then become the resistance, the new resistance? Because I don't think the lawfare stuff can continue. I don't think it's going to be hard to call Trump Hitler when he's got like celebrities hanging out and everything's fine. And like, that's what's going to happen 6 months from now. He is not Hitler. He's not a Nazi. That's all crazy talk. So I don't have a clear vision on what the Democrat Party will do right now. But Jack, I really think that's because they don't either. I think they've been really shook up by this one. I was expecting Trump to win. They were not.
Wow. Did you see the Babylon Bee? It was like Hitler holds the largest pro-Jewish rally in history. Like,
yeah.
Like, there's all those out there. I mean, it's just crazy. As soon as they resort to that sort of stuff, it's a little bit crazy. Letitia James. Most people would not know who she is outside of New York, unless she went after Trump for whatever they're going after him for. Did you see her little statement the other day? Wow.
Oh yeah.
Dude,
I'm a New Yorker. I'm born and raised, right? So New York has a very special place in my heart. Unfortunately, it has fallen into communist madness, but it's an amazing, New York City is an amazing place to go have fun. Poorly governed.
Incredible. That in tone.
Run.
Just the
yeah, no, she's acting like, and it's funny with her. I think at some level she believes this stuff. I think she believes that Donald Trump is some kind of a monster who's going to. You have to remember, people who do really bad things, especially in government, have always created a narrative where they think they're doing the good thing, right? Whether it's just the old to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs mentality, or I've got to do it to you before you do it to me, or this is what social justice, this is what's good for the group, even if it's wrong for the individual. There's always some way. And I think at some level, Letitia James has convinced herself. I mean, I don't think she's a very impressive thinker, put that out there. But I think she's convinced herself that Donald Trump is some kind of existential threat to our liberties. And I would just, the people would bring up, oh, and I did this. I don't know if you saw, I was on Bill Maher and I was trying to like speak reality to these people. It's very, very hard to speak reality to Democrats. You know, throwing down for you, Jack, making sure the truth.
Yeah, that was wild. How'd you feel going to that show? What was it like?
It's great because getting to flex that muscle of real debate and exchange, I kind of miss that. You don't really do that much in the media anymore. So I wish there were more opportunities for that, to be honest with you, because I knew exactly what I was getting into. I've watched that show. Like there was no, sometimes conservatives are like, oh, you know, and the audience is, you got to know the audience is going to clap and shout over you. You got to give it a second. Don't throw your best stuff right away, because, you know, your best response right away, because they're going to burn it with their clapping and their laughter and all that other nonsense. So you got to understand how it's a rigged game, but I think you can operate pretty well within that. But anyway, I was trying to convince them that Trump is not Hitler, and that didn't go over that well, because Bill is very reasonable on some things. He is not reasonable on Trump. He's actually very sound. He's a sound thinker on a range of issues. And I would even say agrees with me on a range of issues, but he thinks, you know, Trump is Hitler, like Orange Hitler. He believes all that stuff. So that's tough. Letitia James is somebody who I think is sort of a true believer in that Trump is this malevolent evil force who must be stopped. And that's really disconcerting because, you know, I mean, if I were living in New York and, you know, Daniel Penny right now is going through a trial and they're very much making it a racial, the prosecutors are making that a racial issue, and the way they're referring, people can go see the transcript. A lot of, you know, and then like the white guy or the white man, Daniel Penny did this. So that's very concerning. But as a Republican, can you get justice in a state, if you're like a high profile Republican of any kind, can you get justice in a state that's run by Democrats? That's run by somebody of the ideology of a Letitia James, who thinks that her role isn't to apply the law fairly and without fear or favor, but to even the score between, you know, oppressed and oppressor, or even the score between, you know, the haves, the have-nots, whatever. Once the legal system is used as a weapon of politics, it all falls apart.
Yeah, that's the real threat right there. So you think that she's out there to slay this monster, and not necessarily to rise herself into more prominence on someone else's coattails, essentially looking at her future in maybe politics.
I mean, I think that anybody who's Attorney General of New York, these kind of roles, they're always thinking about next stop is governor, next stop is president. So I wouldn't be surprised if she has that in her sights. I don't think she has the political skill for it, quite honestly, but, you know, we'll see. I have been wrong before. It is rare, though.
Yeah. So right before we jumped on, one of the members of my team came up and dropped off some beanies for me to check out. She runs our e-commerce, and her husband was at the grocery store and saw a woman push an old man with a veteran's hat wearing a "Make America Great Again" shirt, yelling at him, "You stole my rights. I hope you crash your car," and in broad daylight public. And I wonder if it's going to make our little local paper here. But I mean, that is, I can't imagine someone doing that to someone wearing a Harris shirt, an old man wearing a Harris t-shirt.
I wish I couldn't imagine it, that people would do these sorts of things, but there's a lot of, you said it was someone wearing, just give me
a veteran hat on, the old guy, and he had a either "Make America Great Again" t-shirt on.
So he had MAGA on, and you're saying that someone came up to him and attacked, someone came up to him and attacked a MAGA guy.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, that's not surprising. The Democrats are lunatics. I mean, when you've been told by the biggest media outlets in the country and by the actual heads of the Democrat Party that Trump supporters are Nazis, you know, sometimes they think Nazis need to get punched, even if they're really old. I mean, these people, there's something wrong with them. I mean, I really, I think that, what was it? I think it was Michael Savage who said liberalism is a mental illness or something.
Yes, I think he has a book titled that, perhaps.
Oh yeah, a book titled that.
Might.
I mean, it's very astute observation. I mean, there is a huge correlation, and now this is where people get really mad at you, but it's just true. There's a huge correlation between self-described really serious mental illness and being sort of left on the political spectrum. I'm not saying everyone who's a Democrat's crazy, obviously. I mean, all of my ex-girlfriends who are Democrats are crazy, but in general, I'm married now, very right-wing, very happy. But Just saying. I'm sorry. I want to throw in that joke. I would say that in general, there's a real correlation between like anxiety and these problems that people have, and I think wanting the state to solve all of your problems. I also have a theory that for men, especially because of the gender divide in this election, if you were to do, testosterone and then see like what for men, what the sort of average is for the average Trump voter over the average for the average Biden or Kamala voter. I think you would see, if you did it sort of age stratified, I think you would see substantial differences. I actually believe that.
I think there was some. Rogan was talking about something like that recently. Maybe there was a study.
Well, at NPR, they pulled the testosterone of a bunch of, NPRs were like, oh, like, here we are today, like we're doing a radio show, And look, I mean, radio hosts, I mean, I'm not even a dad yet, and I'm fighting the dad bod. So I'm not like casting aspersions or stones on this stuff. But the truth is, I mean, they pulled these guys who are all guys who were on the NPR show. I forget what show. And I mean, their testosterone levels to a guy were like medically problematic.
Wow.
Right, where they actually it needs to be addressed, right? Because at a certain level, like your body isn't functioning properly, everything else. They had guys, I think there was one guy was like testosterone levels like 180 or something. It was like really, and these guys weren't old. I mean, older, you get older. I'm in my 40s now. I mean, you're a fit and strapping fellow. You look
I'm gonna go work out after this. That's for sure.
Yeah, look like you could be 30, but
thank you.
I'm just saying, these guys were like, probably 30. 35, 40 maybe. And anyway, yeah. So people were like, wow, NPR, really low T, not a shock. Guys, important. I try to get your T checked. Very important.
Wow. That's amazing. And also before we go, the podcast effect, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, thoughts on the current state of American media. Are people sitting down at MSNBC and CNN today and taking a breath and thinking, oh, wow, all those things people have been saying about legacy media on the decline as far as influence goes, maybe they were right?
Oh, the broadcasts, big time. Yeah, man. I think legacy media, this was its last stand. It's going to continue. I'm not saying it's over now, but it will never be, and I'm talking Washington Post, New York Times, CBS News, CNN, they will never achieve the cultural and political power and even dominance that they had in the past again. And I would argue they will never be able to stop the downward trajectory either. So it's an iceberg. It's going to melt slowly, but it's never going to be, growing, right? It's on the decline. It's in a terminal decline now. And a big part of that is, it's honestly technologically driven at some level. I mean, there's just so many ways to get this stuff now that, as the technologies change and podcasts have become so ubiquitous, but also just the destruction of their credibility, which is, I think it's irrevocable. I mean, I think, and it's deserved too. I think that they've acted in a scummy way and people shouldn't believe them. And I've always, journalism as a nonpartisan and neutral activity is a fiction. I mean, that's been something I've said for the whole time. It's funny. People are like, what was your training for media or for, journalism? I'm not a journalist. I wouldn't consider myself that. But what was your training for basically a career in what would be considered journalism? I'm like, CIA, man, propaganda, intelligence, it's all the same. It's all the same game. They just try to convince people that they're looking out for them, right? I mean, in the intelligence world, you're trying to look out for the government or, the government interests of the people. There's no such thing as objective journalism. That was always a fiction. It's gotten more and more left-wing as they've tried to scramble, like places like the Washington Post tried to scramble for relevance and for audience share. But these other shows just have much more cultural relevance. And people want to feel like they know the people that they're listening to, right? The old thing was, you're like, oh, I'm Brian Williams. I wear like a fancy suit and I sound like this and I read off of a teleprompter. It's actually a pretty good Brian Williams impression, if I can say so.
Not bad.
But that now people realize, like, what does this guy even know? Like, why am I even listening to this? We all know what happened with him, by the way. But why should I be listening to this person? They're reading the words that someone else wrote off glass and trying to look a certain way while they do it. Like, there's no gravitas that should come from this. Sitting down and finding out who it is that you're listening to, what they believe, and them being honest about it. I mean, people ask me, they're like, I love it too. They're like, "Are you like really right wing?" I'm like, "Oh, I am really right wing." You know, like I don't ever pretend. I don't ever sit there like, "Oh no, I just sort of, I call down the center." So I think I think it's a good thing. I think that honesty in media and honesty in the more and more honesty in the platforms is really helpful. So I'm all in favor of it. Yeah, there we go.
And speaking of Brian Williams, there's a from someone who I would say leans to the left, but is at least thoughtful. That's what I appreciate. Thoughtful about things and can bring perspectives that I might not be thinking about. I do appreciate that. Malcolm Gladwell has a podcast called Free Brian Williams is the title of it. And but it's really all about lying and these things that you can misremember and all. It's really fascinating podcast. It's a good one, but he called it Free Brian Williams, which is really interesting. And also Malcolm Gladwell, I got to talk to him last year, and I do appreciate also that he calls out his own side for lying. He does not appreciate that, and it seems like a lot of people are just too accepting of being lied to.
Well, I would say this too, and I think that's something that very much comes across from my work with you interviews. It's something you have. It's something that Rogan has. It's something that my friend Sean Ryan has, which is approaching things with a genuine curiosity, right? I think that the old media model, obviously, you were a SEAL and you're a best-selling author, and Sean was a SEAL, and Rogan is like an MMA guy. Like, you have your areas of expertise, competency, and insight you bring to bear. But even within that, like, everybody should be in the mindset of like, there's more to learn, right? There's more. And when you step out of that, especially, right? I mean, dude, one of my favorite Rogan podcasts, just because it was so, was you remember when he had on the bee lady?
No, I didn't watch that one. I'm gonna have to watch it now.
It's just he just sits there. He's talking to this lady, this blonde lady from Texas, and she's just talking about bees and beehives. And like, look, I'm not saying I'd want to watch like a 6-hour long miniseries on it, but it was pretty cool. And he was legitimately interested. And I just think that process of discovery and it really appeals to people. And there's a comfort with somebody when you know that you're learning and it feels like they want to learn too, and I think, like I said, I think you do that. I think Rogan does that. I think people that are in this space that are able to connect with the audience a certain way. And I just would contrast that to my first like big boy job. It wasn't really, I mean, it was an internship, right? But, and people used to think of internships as job. Now they realize it's like glorified child labor that you put on your resume, but put that aside. This is when everybody wanted internships. I was an intern at CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I was 18 years old. I was a young, CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. And I had no interest in the media at the time. I'm going to tell you, it was like a nepotism thing. Like, I had an aunt who knew a guy who could like get my resume there. And, that was the hustle, right? So, but I remember being so deeply unimpressed with Dan Rather, even as an 18, just being like, what does this guy know? But I'd hear him sort of just talking about things in the office, and like, what does this guy know? But then it was, he's sitting there and he does the voice and he reads the screen. I was like, this whole thing is a sham.
Wow.
This guy doesn't know, what, from Shinola. I mean, it was just nonsense. Wow. And I think that really informed my media view. But I'm saying the whole point of the old media is like the voice of God talking to you, but giving you the news, right?
Right.
Like, you sit down and you're like, look, I was a SEAL. We're going to talk combat. We're going to talk national security. We're going to talk author stuff. Like, I got expertise in that. But if you sit down with the bee lady, you're like, I want to learn about the bee lady, or
I'm all about bees. I put honey in my coffee, just like I have James Reese in my books and his. I'm a big fan of the bees. Let's say.
Yeah. So, but you know what I mean? I just think that's the essence of it too, and I'm sorry, I've gone on way too long on this, man. This is like my 5th hour of talking today, by the way. So
thank you.
I apologize.
I appreciate it.
I just say this, like, people who knew me from when I used to do, I don't really do much TV anymore. And that's kind of just a choice because I really just want to focus on doing, the 3 hours of radio and doing podcasts like yours. And, trying to be like a good husband. And we have a baby on the way. So
congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Very excited for it's our first. So it's like, very exciting.
Oh.
But when I used to do a lot of TV, people that know you from TV, they recognize you. People that know you from radio, which is effectively like the first form of long form podcast, but radio, podcasting, they know you, right? Like, they come up to me, the people that knew me from TV, be like, hey, like I saw that, like you're pretty good or whatever. If you listen to me for 3 hours a day on radio, or if someone's listening to you on your podcast all the time, they know my dog's name.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's different. It's different.
Yeah. And for those listening and watching, that you get about 1.5 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes, maybe that's long, on cable cable news. No going back and saying, hey, you know what I said earlier about this thing? You know what I meant to say was this. Oh, you have your shot, and that is it. I learned earlier on, and I keep messing it up though. I don't really like going on. I do it every now and again when my publicist asks me, but I don't like it because it's not a conversation, and you can't go back and say, you know, I don't think that came off really the way I meant. And there's this other example here or whatever. That doesn't exist. You're there for your 1.5 minutes, and it's gone, and it's forever embedded somewhere out there online. It's tough. I don't like doing that at all. I'm a big fan of the Dick Cavett show. Have you watched that show? It is from the go back to the 60s, and it's like the first long form podcast. And it's incredible. You get these stars on, you have like Charles Bronson on, and he's smoking and drinking and talking for an hour. And it is amazing. You really got to know these guys, and the guests that he got for that run. And he's still around today. But he had every major political figure, star, celebrity, interesting person, world leader, all on this show for an extended period of time. And a lot of times I think they're drinking in the green room prior to. And so you got these just amazing insights and got to know these people. So, but I think it's the first long form podcast. It's I'm fascinated by it. It's incredible. Yeah, definitely check it out.
Very cool. All right, I will.
But yeah, man, I try to approach everything as a student. I did in the military. I do as an author. I do in Hollywood, in screenwriting and on set. I always want to learn. Always trying to learn. Always approach things as a student. I don't think I always have, and I don't think that'll ever change. All right, you've been talking forever, so I'm going to save these other ones for when we talk about your book when that comes out. Super excited to check it out.
I think you'll like it. Like, there's some very good history. I did my own research. I wrote my own book, which I know you respect. I did it the old-fashioned way, like you. Actually wrote the book. Not a lot of that in the industry these days. I think it'll be really good. So, and it's on making people's minds go crazy. So we'll get into it.
You have is it come out next year, the year after? It depends on
fall.
How the CIA.
It's gonna be fall. It's set by the publisher for fall, assuming the CIA doesn't sit on it for 6 months, which I don't think they will. There's very little about anything they care about in it. It's not about the CIA, obviously. I wasn't there very long, so.
Yeah, that'd be great. So when we come back on and talk about that, I want to ask, and we'll know a lot more by then about maybe the Epstein client list, maybe the assassination attempt on Trump, perhaps JFK assassination, perhaps Martin Luther King assassination. We'll know a lot more by then about some of these things, and we can discuss it when we talk about your book, and I can talk to you about your days at the agency, path into broadcasting, all of that as well. So, but I'm going to let you go because I know you've been doing this for a long time, but I sincerely appreciate you coming on today. Love going on your show, love talking to you, and really appreciate you being out there and holding the line.
Yeah, thank you, man. You're very kind. I'm a fan, as you know, so thank you. It's cool to do stuff with people you actually love their work, and just keep writing best-selling books and doing awesome shows. And I'll come hang out on the podcast anytime.
Sounds great, man. You take care. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to watch another episode, or click here to watch a clip from the podcast.